Now I want to turn to our first guest from mainland China, Zhang. And he's known as Eric to us. It makes it easier. Zhang, though. Family is over there, has been over there, true hero. Li, tell us about the persecution of your family. Give us your family's history with the Chinese Communist Party.
Thank you, Mr. Bannon. I sincerely appreciate that you and your American friends are separating CCP from us. My family was deemed as a political class enemy against the CCP after so-called communism liberation in 1949, just because my grandfather was a chief judge in a high court in a provincial state before that, and everyone else was entitled to blame and torture my family in public. My grandfather was dragged by CCP red guards to the street and was whipped in public for many times. And my father, together with his brothers and sisters, were forced to kneel beside him to watch. And my grandmother couldn't bear.
Yeah, let me get this right.
Yes,
so your grandfather was a chief justice or chief judge in a regional court, and when the communists took over, they dragged him out in the town square in front of people and made his children kneel next to him, and they whipped him in front of everybody?
Yes, they made children to kneel beside him to watch.
What did that do to your grandfather? How did he survive that? What happened to your grandfather after he was abused by the Chinese Communist Party?
My grandfather was tortured like this for many times, but he narrowly survived. But my grandmother couldn't bear all this and committed suicide in 1959.
So your grandmother ended up killing herself because she just couldn't take her husband and the family being tortured?
Yes, correct.
What was the Chinese Communist Party, what was the crime that they charged your grandfather, who was a chief justice in a regional court? What was the crime that they charged him with to whip him and to torture him?
Because my grandfather was an official in their eyes before 1949. He served the Kuomintang. So after 1949, CCP classified these kind of people into different groups. They named them in different ways. For my father is the evilest one. I don't know how to translate. Maybe they call them the Black Five groups. That means in this group, there are 5 kinds of people who are the top enemies against the CCP. Thank you, sir.
Talk to us about starting then back in the 1950s, when you look at the Chinese Communist Party all the way up to the 70s. Walk us through Chinese history, because the microcosm, Eric, that happened to your family and happened to your grandparents, and obviously your dad, also happened to the nation overall with some big movements. Can you walk because the American people think of the 1950s, for us, it was a golden age after the war. We had the building of the suburbs, this kind of golden age of the 50s, right? Tremendous economic progress, tremendous freedom, the really growth of America into a superpower. Walk our audience through what happened to China over those years from basically 1949 all the way to the mid-70s.
In my eyes, after 1949, communism will do 3 things. First, the cue to take, because the core ideology of communism is based on taking down every bit of current social structure, robbing lands and wealth, and setting up a regime with guns. Second, the cue to be more powerful. Communists will not gain the ultimate power until anyone is afraid and compromised. Third, the cue to reshuffle. CCP is a meat grinder. The internal fights are very bloody because the winner gets more power and wealth. So they launched a series of political class fights and inside hatred among people, make them fight against each other and get profit from it. That's why my grandfather was one victim of the persecuted one. Thank you, sir.
Talk to us about, in that process, overall, the Great Leap Forward, the Great Famine, and the Cultural Revolution. Walk our audience through what those are and what that meant to the Chinese people.
Thank you. Great Leap Forward is an extreme communist political movement from 1958 to 1960. CCP, led by Chairman Mao Zedong, thought China would surpass USA and HK and the UK in terms of total output of steel. So they ordered every family to lessen the time in planting the crops and smash all their iron cooking utensils and to forge the so-called world-class steel in the traditional stove in the center of each village. Such ridiculous production process was accompanied by political critical assembly in which class enemies were condemned and tortured in public. 30 million people were persecuted to death. And due to almost 3 years of man-made suspension of cropping, the Great Leap Forward straightly resulted in the Great Famine in the next 3 years, from 1960 to 1962. 30 million people died from hunger during the Great Famine.
So hang on for a second. I just want to make sure people understand this. They had a great leap forward to try to industrialize and catch up with the United Kingdom and the United States. And in doing that, they had all the rural villages take all their pots and pans and they want to turn everything into a steel forge, correct? And you're saying in that process of collectivization, 30 million people died in that process, and also because all the peasants are not farming, they're trying to become an international global steel power by taking and melting down all their pots and pans and everything that's metal. That in addition, right after that, the Great Famine, another 30 million starved to death. Is that it? The Great Leap Forward and the Great Famine are interconnected that way?
Yes, it's straightly connected.
What was the response of the Chinese people? Did the Chinese Communist Party have, because one of the things we're trying to make sure Americans know that today of the 1.4 billion people in China, there's only 90 million members of the Chinese Communist Party. And of that, only a very few matter, in the handful of thousands. It's a totalitarian dictatorship. But how did the Chinese people respond in the late 50s and early 60s to the Great Leap Forward and to the Great Famine?
And different people have different opinions because there are two reasons. Because for the Great Famine, it took place mostly in the middle-sized and the small cities and the rural areas, but not mainly in the southeast China, because where they have rich land, it's very arable, they can crop anything. And for people who are younger, they don't know about it, and the CCP covered it with all their propaganda system through all these decades of years. And some people, even at their 40s now, don't know really what happened at that time. Thank you, sir.
You're saying people in their 40s right now in China are not taught? They're not taught about the Great Leap Forward. They're not taught about the collectivization. They're not taught. Are not taught anything about the Great Famine.
They were taught some of the knowledge, and the CCP falsified and twisted the knowledge that were input in their minds, such as in old times, Communist Party, some people of the Communist Party did bad things, but we have get rid of them. And now CCP is different. We have reformed successfully. So CCP divert people's attention when they focus on such bloody history.